welcome to new and returning viewers. Today I'm taking a look at The Empath Survival Guide by Judith Orloff, who is a medical doctor, Life Strategies for Sensitive People. What I've come to realize is that a number of people don't seem to understand the difference between empathy and an empath. So I'm going to go through some of the things the author says in her book. First of all, on page 1, I'm a physician with 14 years of conventional medical training at USC and UCLA. I'm also an empath. In my medical practice of over 2 decades, I specialize in treating highly sensitive people like myself. Though there is a spectrum of sensitivity that exists in human beings, empaths are emotional sponges who absorb both the stress and joy of the world. We feel everything, often to an extreme, and have little guard up between others and ourselves. As a result, we're often overwhelmed by excessive stimulation and prone to exhaustion and sensory overload. Those are very important points and certainly things to remember. On page 2, she goes on to say, empaths have an extremely reactive neurological system. We don't have the same filters that other people do to block out stimulation. As a consequence, we absorb into our bodies both the positive and stressful energies around us. We're so sensitive that it's like holding something in a hand that has 50 fingers instead of 5. We are truly super responders. So she's talking about how there is a definite difference for the way an empath moves through the world and what they're exposed to and how that impacts them versus someone else. On page 5, she goes on to state, ordinary empathy means our heart goes out to another person when they're going through a difficult period. It also means that we can be happy for others during their times of joy. As an empath, we actually sense other people's emotions, energy, and physical symptoms in our bodies without the usual filters that other people have. We can experience other people's sorrows and their joy. We're super sensitive to their tone of voice and body movements. We can hear what they don't say in words, but communicate non-verbally and through silence. Empaths feel things first, then think, which is the opposite of how most people function in our over-intellectualized society. There is no membrane that separates us from the world. This makes us very different from other people who have had their defenses up almost from the time they were born. I wanted to read those particular parts before I begin talking about the actual book because I want people to understand there is a big difference between someone who feels empathy, as in happy or sad for someone else going through a challenging situation, and the experience for an empath who physically and emotionally feels what they're walking into and when they're communicating with other people. An example that I will share, and yes, I am empathic, is when I'm talking to people, it isn't just body language that I'm paying attention to or the words that someone's saying. There are feelings that go with that type of interaction, and it occurs on the computer as well as in person. When I come across someone who isn't being honest or truthful. It just feels like walking through a landfill site to me. They may be smiling, they may be saying all the right words, but there is just something niggling in the background that gives me a clue this isn't someone that I want to be around very often, and this isn't someone who is trustworthy. So I just wanted to put that out there. Also, it's important to remember, just like any other skill or ability, it isn't always 100% foolproof. It's impacted by how well you're doing yourself emotionally, whether you're overtired, whether you're taking care of yourself. There are a lot of other factors involved. So I don't just base my interactions on different feelings that I get when I'm interacting with someone. I, of course, take everything into account, previous interactions, all that type of thing. On page 6, the author goes on to talk about 3 different types of empaths. So, physical empaths, who typically tend to absorb other people's physical symptoms. So if someone's having an ache or a pain, the empath will feel that. There are emotional empaths, and they typically pick up the different feelings and emotions in an area. And then there are the intuitive empaths. The intuitive empaths are divided into various different categories. They may be more sensitive to telepathic information. They may be more sensitive to information from plants or animals or spirit communication. She goes on to say on page 7, empaths have diverse and beautifully nuanced sensitivities. You may be one or more of the above types. The author goes on to share exercises about how to keep your aura clear and protect yourself in various situations if you know you're going into perhaps a difficult meeting or a different situation. Some people do activities like white light and visualizing that, covering themselves. I do things like, and this particular product is from Color Energy, a Canadian company located in BC. And no, I'm not sponsored by them, but this is an aura cleanser. And I have several bottles of this around my home, and I have one in the car, and there's no smell to it, and you just do a light little spritz, take a nice deep breath, and you're good. Another thing that I personally do is carry crystals, and I have crystals around my home. This particular one is a rose quartz, which of course stands for love and positive energies. You can keep it in your pocket, use it as a touchstone, and there are a number of other crystals that you can do for that as well. I also make up my own spritzer. So those are just a few things you can do, and as I say, the author has some other tips as well. She goes on to talk about that in Western mainstream medicine, sadly, sometimes people are misdiagnosed because here they don't factor in the subtle energy body, unlike Eastern medicine, which takes not just the physical individual into account, but they also look at the different energy systems. So you have things like acupuncture, which focuses on the meridians and that type of thing. On page 34, she has another quiz to help you determine whether you're a physical or emotional empath, how to work through all of that. The author also talks about learning to identify the difference between your own energy and someone else's. And a perfect example I can give of that is when I'm feeling upset or down, it's looking at, okay, what's going on in my life right now? And if there isn't anything that I can pinpoint to explain why I may be feeling that, then I look to other factors. Now, it's been a long time since I've had other issues kind of interfere with how my day flows. But years ago, there was an individual who I was in touch with and who would often have different things happening. I remember being with someone and they said to me, how's your day going? And I'm like, my day's great, but so and so's is terrible. And sure enough, when I got in touch with this individual later, they'd been having a difficult day and thinking about how they wanted to talk to me and get in touch. That just all physically, along whether you want to call them energy waves or whatever, ended up coming to me. So that's why I've definitely become more aware and mindful about doing things like carrying crystals and using my spritzers and doing my visualization exercises. Because if you're just beginning on this path and trying to understand and figure things out, it can be very frustrating and challenging. Other strategies that she suggests for blocking toxic energy are, of course, setting clear boundaries with people. Realizing that there are times you need to rest, you need to take care of yourself, and that's okay. Taking a break from social media. As we all know, there's just so much out there. At times it can just be sensory overload. There are conflicting messages. There are different issues that go on. So sometimes you just need to take that break away from it all. Or, stay off your phone for a little while instead of going through messages and everything all the time. You need to take that break and reduce some of that stimulation. It also explains why I do not engage in drama-rama. I do not engage with certain individuals. It's just life's too short, and I would much rather connect and be around people who I can have open, honest discussions with, and that doesn't mean that they agree with me or that I agree with them. I enjoy hearing different viewpoints and getting different ideas. So keep that in mind when you're deciding who you want to interact with and how you're spending your time on social media. For an empath, it's important to have some time alone, again, because we need to reduce some of that stimulation. I enjoy being out in my yard, whether I'm gardening or sitting out there with a cup of coffee or just sitting and enjoying the day when the weather allows. You need to find what works best for you. There's that great connection with the artist date. I talked about Julia Cameron's 12-week program, The Artist's Way, a few videos ago. That's an excellent way, particularly for an empath, to just have that alone time and do something fun and creative. Grounding exercises are very helpful. Meditation works for some people. So again, it's finding what's going to work best for you. The author goes on to talk about how often people who may not be aware that they're empaths end up turning to either food, drink, or alcohol to just try and reduce some of that overstimulation and close things off. So it's very important that if this is something that is impacting your life, do the research, talk to your doctor if they're open to it. Checking out the Empath's Survival Guide, and I first found this book at my public library, and I purchased it later when I decided it would be a helpful resource. You can also go to Goodreads and see what other people are saying about this particular book. The author stresses, as do I, on page 61, she says, self-awareness is liberating, no shame, and no blame. So as you're going through and determining whether this is something that fits and makes sense for you, perhaps explain some of the different things in terms of your relationships, whether that's with family or friends or co-workers, taking a look at things and not in terms of blame. This isn't about what you've done or blaming other people for different scenarios. It's about taking an open, honest assessment of a situation and then coming up with different strategies and tools of how you can do things differently in the future. As the author says with relationships, it's important to set clear boundaries and consider partnership, not one person always giving, one person always receiving or taking. It's a mutual give and take. And again, whether that's family, a partnership, co-workers, it's about setting up healthy, fulfilling relationships with other people. Personal space is very important. Everyone has a different comfort zone about where people are standing. I don't like people who are like right up in my face type of thing. Other people don't find that bothersome. So again, assessing what are you comfortable with and letting other people know that. As in Steering by Starlight by Martha Beck and The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, because I always tend to find books connect. In Steering by Starlight, Martha Beck also talks about energy vampires, and I'll be doing a video on that in the next month or so. Judith Orloff has 7 different types of vampires that she talks about, so I'll put those 2 concepts together in an upcoming video. The Celestine Prophecy, if you haven't read it, talks about 9 insights from a Mayan manuscript. The book is a parable, which is why I personally enjoy it. It also talks about the energies that people put out, how some people drain our energy while other people uplift. So it's the same type of concept. Again, it's about an honest assessment, looking at the situations that you're in, and how do you feel after you've interacted with someone, whether that's attending a live chat on YouTube, face-to-face conversations, a private chat. Take a look at the scenario, the conversations that you've had, and are they feeling you uplifted and energized and positive with a lot of food for thought and things to think about? Or do they make you feel drained and exhausted? And then you need to decide, is there some way that you can switch that around? Is it doing something as simple as using your spritzer before you go into that situation? For those who have Reiki training, there are different tools and strategies that you can use there to protect your energy before walking into those situations. This isn't about avoiding difficult or challenging situations. It's about learning how you interact with the world, how that impacts you, and about building and developing skills and tools so that when you do have to go into those difficult, challenging situations, you have some other things that you can try to make that less difficult. Because no matter what, there are always going to be bumps, blips, and issues in the world. So the more that we can be aware of how we're interacting and responding to things, the more tools and skills that we have, the better we're able to get through those difficult times and then get to the other side of that situation. She has a section about parenting empathic children. Personally, I think that section itself is useful for any parent of a child and for anyone who's working with children. There are many wonderful tips that she has in terms of interacting with children. Another thing that the author talks about, which of course is crucial for anyone who is empathic, is being mindful about burnout. Because for an empath, and again, regardless of the situation that you're working in, whether it's counseling, as I did, whether you're working in schools, as I also did, whether you're working in retail, hospital, whatever work setting, and taking care of other people in your home, whether that's a child or perhaps an elderly family member. If you're empathic, and even if you're not, you need to be mindful of taking care of yourself so that when you're feeling good and you're energized, you're able to give more of yourself to those that you're taking care of or supporting. From page 190 to 202, the author goes through all the different types of intuitive empaths. So people who are telepathic or have extrasensory perception or are mediums. And those issues, of course, come up in the books Ghost Among Us by James Van Praagh and Crossing Over by John Edward. Like I say, books all tend to connect back to different things. So they also talk about the need for them having to be mindful of personal space and when it's okay to do readings and when it isn't. Both very interesting books. And again, I first read Ghosts Among Us actually as an audiobook through my public library. The John Edward book I actually found at my local thrift store. So there are lots of different ways to find and give books a test run before deciding to make that purchase, because books have definitely become an investment. Another book that comes to mind in connection with this one, because she talks about nature and animals, is Animal Speak by Ted Andrews. And it's one I don't have to look at to remember because I've been using this particular book for decades. I have a number of different pages marked. I have highlights and dates throughout it when I've referred back to try and find different information. And I can tell looking at the front here, I've had this book since December 27th, 01. So it literally has been a couple of decades. There's wonderful information in here. Ted Andrews also has another book called Nature Speak, and that relates particularly to mountains, the landscape itself, and how to make those connections with nature. I'm talking about one book, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 others that it connects to. I still have my pile sitting here from when I did my other video, and those books could all relate back to this as well. It's Pam Grout with E Squared, E Cubed, The 4 Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Purposes by Dan Millman, the Louise Hay collection, Ask and It Is Given by Esther Hicks, The Magic of Believing, which I've talked about before with Claude Bristol, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, The Field and Frequency. The Field is by Lynne McTaggert, Frequencies by Penney Pierce. Those all both talk about your thoughts and how things work in the world and your own reality and quantum physics and so many other things. These all interconnect. I have Creating Money by Sinea Roman. She channeled an entity known as Orin, so there's a lot of inspirational exercises and activities and affirmations in there. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior is also by Dan Millman, the individual learning about his path and his steps. This could also tie in with The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I've discovered I've been saying his name wrong, so I apologize for that. So again, it may start with one book, but there's so many other books that it can spiral out to and learning about different things. All of these have great tips. Again, whether you're an empath or not, it never hurts to take a look at how are we interacting with other people? How are those interactions making us feel? Are they uplifting us? Are they motivating us? Are they getting us to stop and think? Because again, there is nothing wrong with constructive criticism, provided it is given in a caring and supportive way. In other words, we're not trying to be mean, we're not putting someone down. You're offering suggestions on maybe tweaking or how to improve something. That's very different from degrading someone or just being nasty and saying something ignorant because you can. And again, it's up to the individual to look at the scenario, look at the situation, and decide, why is this person saying this to me? Are they trying to be helpful? Is this someone I respect? Is this someone I trust? And if it is, then stop and consider whether it actually fits, because I did give the example in a previous video of someone who I did respect, and what they said was not accurate. I let it bother me, which was silly. But on the other hand, it also made me stop and think and really take a look at the time period that they were talking about. So although it was very hurtful and difficult at the time, it was a blessing in disguise because so many other positive things happened from the flow of that. And most of all, me being more mindful of what I allow to upset or bother me. So, as I say, it's important to think about, why is someone telling you something and is it accurate? The author finishes off on chapter 9 by talking about the gift of being an empath. And for those of us who are aware of what that means, it definitely does not seem like a gift. And I'm willing to bet the majority of us would gladly give it up like that. Most days, some days. But on the other hand, once you get to recognize it and understand it, it really is a gift. It can help you avoid some otherwise difficult situations. It can help you, if you're listening to your intuition and the signals you're getting, stop you from getting into situations that may not be for your highest good. It's coming to the acceptance of, yes, this is a real thing. It may not seem like a gift initially. You get labeled different things by other people who may not understand what empathy is. But the more that you learn and honor yourself, the more you realize the world that you walk in may be very different from what other people experience, but that's okay. Remember to stay true to yourself and let your light shine. I also want to mention that in the beginning of this book, for some who may doubt that empathy is an actual thing, Judith Orloff, a psychiatrist from UCLA, advises physicians on improving their intuitive powers. Her simple but powerful message is, listen to your patients. That is by the New England Journal of Medicine. I wanted to read that because, as I say, there are people who doubt that being empathic is a real thing. As this particular doctor points out, as did that quote from a journal of medicine, it is being recognized as a real condition. On page 215 and onward, the author has a nice summary of all the exercises that were included throughout the book. So it's a quick, easy reference to go back and redo the exercises and read them again. On 243, she talks about things that you can do if you're interested in setting up a support group for other people who are also empathic. At the end, she also includes a list of other books to read, and I was quite happy to see that one of them was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, who I've also read, and I'm actually planning to reread this book again sometime this year. You can also learn more about Eckhart by watching his videos here on YouTube. Another book that she mentions that I very much enjoy and have used as well is Energy Medicine Balancing Your Body's Energies for Optimal Health, Joy, and Vitality. This is by Donna Eden with David Feinstein. And there's a foreword by Carolyn Myss. She also has a foreword in Judith Orloff's book. There's a lot of information out there about Carolyn Myss, and she is a medical intuitive. She talks about archetypes and many other things, so she's also a great author to check out. I enjoy this particular book because it has exercises that you can easily do. She shows the different meridian and acupuncture points so you're aware of where they are. I have a number of the pages dog-eared, and there's exercises that I really need to start doing again to get started in the morning and just getting that whole proper flow going. I always seem to start with one book, and then there are so many other books that relate back or validate and confirm what I've already been reading. If you found this video to be of benefit, please be sure to click that like button down below, as that lets me know who's listening and finding the content useful. Let me know in the comments down below whether you've read any of the authors that I've mentioned. Do you have a particular book that helps you out on those challenging, difficult days? And if you enjoy content of a bookish nature, if you enjoy nature videos or silly cats on Fridays, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. Until next time, be sure to take care of yourself